everyone, welcome to this video. Today I would like to talk about 10 common mistakes that pianists do when they practice runs. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about runs that split into groups of 4, which I think are the most common type of runs. For example, you have in the Chopin Etude 10 number 4, right? They're always split in 4. And you have this everywhere basically in music. You have this in Beethoven, in Chopin, Liszt, I mean every romantic work sooner or later. I will be showing you with the example of the Chopin Prelude number 16, right, this one, right? I will show you some examples and 10 mistakes and maybe tips if in case you don't make the mistakes. They can be just regarded as tips. Always keep in mind, whatever works for some people doesn't work for others, so it's more of a testing and trying until you find the right formula. So the first mistake I see people do is the groups become too long, right? For example, in this Chopin Prelude here, number 16, doing a group that is that long, for example, and so on, if you continue, right? You're doing quite a long chunk here. So a chunk is like a number of notes or number of information that you want to focus on, or that you actually split in your mind. So for example, in this piece, very obviously the groups are in 4, right? Like I said, it's the most common, especially since common time is 4/4. So 4 quarter notes. So you have a lot of groups written in 4. So the first mistake would be to practice too long of a group. This is more something you want to do at a later stage, I think. At the early stage, you should split it into shorter groups, maybe half a bar, or you can do every 4 plus 4. I will get to that later. There's also something you have to watch out there, but definitely not 4 bars or 8 bars in the beginning. So if the group is too long, then you will lose a bit of concentration on it, and it's better in the beginning if you make smaller groups and later you combine them. The second thing has directly to do with the first one, because if you practice only in this short group of 4 plus 4, you know, let's say here and so on, right? You do 4 plus 4 plus 4. The problem you're going to run into is that you never practice the transitioning element. So you never practice the thing that connects group 1 to group 2 to group 3. One quick way to eliminate this thing or to improve is that you include the first note of the next group. So as you see in this bar, we have 4 notes and then 4 notes, but let's just try to do 5 in the beginning, right? And automate this movement as 1. And then hold and play that note slow. And then you continue with 4. But as you can see, now you're already in the next group. So you didn't stop, right? But you continue right into in the next group. And so on. You can do like 1 note into the next group, you can do 2 notes into the next group, but it's good to have variation. If you only practice like 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, it will be the transition of those groups will suffer from that. So it's good to also include the first note from the next, and then you can continue and do 2 notes from the next, you know, and then you cycle through, and eventually you're back at 4 plus 4. Number 3 is doing only slow practice and only fast practice. So yeah, slow practice is great, but you should not only do slow practice, because like I've said in one video already, the mechanics of playing slowly and quickly are 2 very different kind of things. They're different in many ways. In slow tempo you have more time to do things. In fast tempo you have less time. Therefore, the freedom that you have in a slow tempo is not always beneficial. So about the split, I would say maybe like 80-20 is a common split for slow and fast practice. You can of course shift this over time the more confident you get with the piece, But also then, if you're very confident with the piece, never forget to include some slow practice. So yeah, slow practice would of course, um, give you more information about everything, and it would ingrain things. It would really make them permanent in your mind, right? And so on. And you can really prepare movements very well like this. But you have to include fast movements and the faster tempo too, because only doing the one thing without the other, you're gonna be very surprised once you try to play fast. And only doing fast without doing slow, you lose a lot of information and detail, and you can be more efficient with your movements. Okay, next we have accents, and these also result from the groups. So, I mean, it's very common for if you practice like, this piece is just a placeholder, but you can imagine like you have some Clementi, you have some Mozart, especially for beginners who learn about the 4+4, they might run into accidentally, no pun intended, accenting every first of the group. Actually, there is like a practice method about accents. For example, you can practice accenting always the first note and then the second and then the third, you know, and then the fourth and so on. This is a good type of practice drill, but I'm talking about just by accident or by memorizing it this way that every group has an accent on the first. This is a common mistake, especially for, I would say, beginners and like intermediates. The next thing is about forgetting the phrase, right? The phrase in the end is guiding you through the runs and makes the whole thing more interesting, right? I mean, so the crescendo and so on, right? Where is the peak of the run? Where does the diminuendo start, and how does it develop? These are things that I would advise you to do in a slow tempo. For example, here, right? And then a bit more. These are things that are very nicely done in a slow tempo. Can be memorized with muscle memory. So doing a crescendo or not doing it, you might have an easier time later on if you try to play the piece, because your hand will automatically make the phrase and open the phrase. Okay, next one. This is a big sin, I would say, is doing different fingerings when you're doing runs. Um, this one is very dangerous, because if you practice one thing many times and not every time, but every now and then you use a different fingering, then you're basically unlearning what you tried to learn, right? So you have to choose one fingering and stick with it. It's notoriously difficult to change fingerings for something that you've played hundreds and maybe thousands of times. It's possible by just replacing the new information. But please, before you play the run and before you practice it, make sure you know what fingering you want to choose. And when you're executing it or practicing, make the fingering the same every time and control it. Because if you use a little bit of different fingering here and there, it's very quickly becoming a problem. No metronome is also a bit of a not ideal thing to do, in my opinion, because even very good pianists, they become very good at rhythm awareness, right? But we never become really perfect at it. So sometimes it's good to turn on the metronome. And for someone who is a beginner or intermediate, this is even more true. So you probably have a good sense of rhythm. Yeah, I'm not here to bash your sense of rhythm, but the metronome is just more accurate. And one could argue, this, but music should not be mechanically and like this. Well, yeah, it shouldn't be, but you have to start with this and then you put your own version. It's not like your playing is gonna be super metronomically either way. you know. So I'm not encouraging people to play metronomically. I'm encouraging them to check with a metronome, um, and improve their timing, especially in slow to medium tempos. You can throw on a metronome and do a couple of run throughs. And of course, later on, you will not use the metronome and play more freely. But runs most of the time have to be quite accurate in terms of timing and beat. So it's good to turn on the metronome. I mean, that's quite a nice way of saying it. You know, I always have to soften up for the YouTube crowd, but absolutely you should use a metronome. Also, it's very good to start slow. Yeah, you start with a slow tempo like 60, and then you can keep track of it and slowly increase. And you know, this way you also are aware of your progress, especially useful for advanced or like intermediate pianists, I believe. The next problem is not repeating enough. The amount of times you have to repeat a phrase or a passage or an etude or a piece that has a lot of runs, you know, for it to work, it highly depends on your technique and how complex the piece is. It takes a lot of times, like hundreds, thousands of times of repeating the same thing and repeating them pretty much the same way. Which brings me to another point. This is technically not one in the video, but I guess I'm making it now. Hand position and hand posture should be similar, of course, every time that you play the passage. You know, that's also variation that you don't want, especially when you repeat something hundreds of times. You want to repeat it the same way, and it's you know, not sure how many times it takes. Some runs you can do 10 times and it works, right? Or even 5 times because it's very straightforward. But some of them are complex and it takes hundreds, if not more. So repeat, repeat, repeat. Not repeating enough is a common mistake, and then people wonder why it doesn't improve. You just didn't repeat it enough times. You know, you didn't drill it enough times. Okay, then one more, not really mistake, but one tip I would give is some articulation practice. Yeah, you can do 2 notes staccato, 2 legato like this. You can do all of them staccato. You can do them, you know, in different ways. Of course, also rhythmic practice. You also should do the other way around. Always practice, you know, both rhythms with the punctuation, not just one, but always both. 2 more things I would say are kind of tips and maybe could lead to mistakes. The first thing is if you try to increase the tempo too quickly, this could give you mostly like rhythmic issues, I would say, but also it can give you wrong notes. So if you like look at a passage and you very quickly read it, right, and you say like, okay, I'm just gonna play this, especially in a piece that has many flats and accidentals that are then turned into, you know, natural notes, you might memorize and automate wrong notes if you jump too quickly into it and try to memorize it. So before you do any of that, please make sure that absolutely you have the right notes, you have the right rhythm, the right fingering, and don't just play them too quickly. And that also leads me to my last point, which is just the tempo, right? Runs are mostly technical figures, I would say, but they still have to express something. That's why they are still phrased to some degree. So in the end, in your performance, make sure that the notes still speak and try to convey something. If it's just an effect, you know, then it's just an effect. But if it has a musical meaning, then try to show that meaning, you know, with your phrasing, show with dynamics and with your articulation, and don't just play 16th notes, because any MIDI in the world can just do that. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe and leave a comment if you have questions. I'll see you in the next video.